10 in the morning. 17th of August, 1943. The ancient port of Messina lies half buried under dust and shattered stone, the Mediterranean wind carrying the smell of salt and smoke through streets still warm from battle. A column of British vehicles snakes through the ruins in perfect formation. At its center sits Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, upright in his staff car, beret angled just so, ribbons perfectly aligned. He has brought bagpipers. He has prepared remarks. He believes he's about to seal the Sicilian campaign with a triumphant British signature. But as his convoy turns into the main piazza, something is wrong. The engine's slow, the pipes fall silent, and instead of cheers from his own troops, Montgomery hears laughter, loud, careless, unmistakably American. He looks up. There, leaning against a dusty command car, boots polished and helmet tilted back, cigar glowing in the Sicilian sun, stands Lieutenant General George S. Patton. Freshly shaved, checking his watch, smiling as if he has been waiting for hours. The conqueror has arrived late to his own victory. If you love moments in history where pride, rivalry, and raw ambition collide, you're in the right place. This is WWII, Silent Valor. And today we're stepping into one of the most dramatic showdowns between Allied commanders of the Second World War. Before we go further, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the rivalries that shaped the war. Because what happened in Messina wasn't just a race, it was the beginning of a feud that would echo all the way to Germany. To understand the weight of that handshake in the piazza, you have to peel back the polished layers of Allied propaganda and confront the uncomfortable truth of 1943. The so-called special relationship between Britain and America was far from equal. At this stage of the war, it resembled something closer to master and apprentice. The British Eighth Army, hardened by desert warfare, had broken the myth of German invincibility at El Alamein under Montgomery's command. To many in London and even within Allied headquarters, Monty was the gold standard, disciplined, meticulous, victorious. The Americans were still proving themselves. The disaster at Kasserine Pass earlier that year had left a stain on their reputation. British officers whispered that the United States Army was enthusiastic but inexperienced, well-equipped but tactically naive. Even General Harold Alexander, the overall Allied ground commander in the Mediterranean, showed little effort to hide his preference. Montgomery was his precision instrument. Patton was a volatile asset, useful but unpredictable. When Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, was drawn up, the politics were as important as the strategy. The eastern coastal road leading directly to Messina was handed to Montgomery. It was the straight path, the obvious route of glory. Patton's 7th Army was assigned the western flank. His orders were clear: protect Monty's side, secure the interior, and do not overreach. In other words, stand guard while Britain claimed the spotlight. On paper, it seemed airtight. The Sicilian interior was mountainous, its roads narrow and twisted. British planners believed mechanized forces would bog down there. They assumed the Americans would struggle without careful guidance. Montgomery himself even floated the idea that Patton's army could be broken up and distributed as reinforcements to the 8th Army. The leash was tight, but they misjudged the dog. Only 3 days after the landings, on the 13th of July, 1943, Alexander issued a directive that ignited the tension. He drew what became known as the blue line on the map, granting Highway 124, the only reliable inland route, to Montgomery. Patton's advancing divisions were ordered to halt and withdraw from the road. It was a calculated redirection, and to Patton, it was humiliation. Then reality intervened. Montgomery's advance up the east coast collided head-on with determined German resistance near Catania. Elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division entrenched themselves with deadly precision. By the 15th of July, the vaunted 8th Army was grinding forward at less than a mile per day. The heat was suffocating. Vehicles jammed the narrow roads in endless columns. Supplies stalled. The Grand Eastern thrust slowed to a crawl. On the western flank, Patton watched and waited. His men were supplied, they were eager, and their commander was running out of patience. On the 17th of July, Patton made a decision that defied both his written orders and British expectations. He pivoted. He ordered Major General Lucien Truscott and the 3rd Infantry Division to strike northwest toward Palermo. It was not a cautious probe. It was an audacious gamble. The march that followed became legend. In 72 relentless hours, American infantry covered nearly 100 miles of punishing terrain. They moved under a blazing sun that drove temperatures into the triple digits. The pace became known as the Truscott Trot, a forced march averaging 5 miles per hour across mountains and broken roads. Soldiers advanced 25 to 30 miles a day, skirmishing, pushing, never pausing long enough for the enemy to reset. On the 22nd of July, Palermo fell. The Italian garrison surrendered with surprising speed. More than 50,000 prisoners were taken. A deep water port fell into American hands, solving logistical challenges in one bold stroke. While Montgomery struggled for inches in the east, Patton had seized half the island in less than a week. But Palermo was not the finish line. It was the starting pistol for something far more personal. The distance from Palermo to Messina along Sicily's northern coast stretched roughly 160 miles, a jagged ribbon of road carved into cliffs that plunged toward the sea. Retreating German forces transformed that route into a gauntlet. Bridges were blown, more than a dozen major spans destroyed. Craters pocked the asphalt. Mines, thousands of them, were hidden along approaches and in tunnels. Every bend promised an ambush. Patton refused to slow. On the 8th of August, and again on the 11th, he launched amphibious end runs behind German lines at San Fratello and Brolo. These landings were risky, improvised, and carried out with minimal naval support. They bypassed destroyed bridges and cut retreat paths. At Brolo, American infantry held their precarious foothold for more than a day under intense pressure, buying critical time. Momentum became Patton's weapon. Speed disoriented the enemy and compressed their options. By the 16th of August, American units were within sight of Messina. At the same moment, Montgomery's leading elements remained miles south, stalled, yet again by demolished infrastructure and stubborn resistance. The math was simple. The Germans were withdrawing. The island was effectively lost to them, and now only symbolism remained. On the morning of the 17th of August, 1943, Messina stood in uneasy quiet. Smoke drifted over rooftops. The sounds of artillery had faded. Civilians watched cautiously from shattered windows. Into this tense calm rolled Montgomery's convoy, expecting ceremony. Instead, he found theater. American tanks were parked at key intersections. Military police directed traffic. Stars and stripes fluttered over municipal buildings. And in the center of the square stood Patton, radiating confidence. Accounts differ in detail, but the essence is unmistakable. The handshake was firm, the smiles thin. One had arrived to claim victory, the other had already claimed it. Earlier that day, Patton had sent a signal to Alexander, "I am in Messina." Some versions add a sharper edge, suggesting Monty need not hurry. Whether embellished or exact, the message captured the spirit of the moment. The race was over. For Montgomery, who approached war as a carefully calculated science, this spectacle felt unprofessional. He believed in overwhelming preparation, secured flanks, synchronized artillery, deliberate pressure. Patton believed speed itself created security. Move fast enough and the enemy never stabilizes. Take risks bold enough and hesitation becomes your ally. In Messina, doctrine met audacity, and audacity arrived first. Yet triumph carried shadows. The strain of the campaign weighed heavily on Patton. His relentless push had demanded extraordinary endurance from his troops. During hospital visits earlier in the campaign, he encountered soldiers suffering from battle fatigue, exhausted, emotionally shattered men who could no longer fight. Patton reacted with fury. In 2 separate incidents, he struck soldiers and accused them of cowardice. When news of these slapping incidents reached General Dwight D. Eisenhower. The victory glow dimmed. Eisenhower understood morale, politics, and public perception. However brilliant Patton's maneuvering, such behavior could not be ignored. Reprimands followed. Apologies were demanded. Patton's command would later be curtailed. So the irony was bitter. The general who had outrun Montgomery to Messina had also outrun the tolerance of his superiors. Still, the rivalry born in Sicily refused to fade. It hardened. Montgomery never forgot the sting of arriving second. Patton never forgot the look in Monty's eyes. Their competition would ripple through subsequent campaigns, through arguments over supply priority, strategic direction, and operational credit. When Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Normandy under Operation Overlord, personalities and pride were never far from planning tables. When Montgomery later advanced the bold airborne gamble of Operation Market Garden, critics quietly remembered Sicily. When the crisis of the Battle of the Bulge erupted, coordination between British and American commands carried the weight of old grudges. Official histories speak of unity. They celebrate cooperation and shared sacrifice. And yes, Allied victory required both. But beneath the polished communiques ran currents of ambition and rivalry that shaped decisions in ways rarely acknowledged. For the soldiers in Messina Square, the moment felt electric. British troops arrived dusty and fatigued from slow advances against entrenched resistance. American troops stood energized by rapid conquest. Flags snapped in the wind. Cameras clicked. The symbolism was unmistakable. Something larger than a city had changed hands. The British Empire, seasoned and proud, still commanded respect. But the industrial might and restless aggression of the United States had stepped decisively onto center stage. In that sunlit piazza, the balance of Allied prestige tilted. Montgomery brought discipline, caution, and the weight of imperial tradition. Patton brought speed, improvisation, and unfiltered audacity. Both approaches had value, both carried risk. But on that day, speed won the spectacle, and spectacle matters. As you reflect on this clash of egos and doctrines, ask yourself, was Patton reckless brilliance or necessary evolution? Was Montgomery prudent realism or rigid pride? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Debates like this keep history alive, and your perspective adds to the conversation. If this story gave you a new lens on the Sicilian campaign, share it with someone who thinks they already know everything about the Second World War. And if you want more untold rivalries, more moments where personalities reshaped battlefields, stay with WWII Silent Valor. Because history isn't just about maps and dates, it's about men standing in dusty squares, realizing the world has shifted beneath their feet. On this August 1943, in the ruins of Messina, two generals shook hands. One smile through frustration, the other through vindication. The campaign ended. The war rolled on. But from that moment forward, every Allied decision carried an echo of Sicily. The student had not just matched the master. He had arrived first.